country is facing a wake-up call on urban safety and oversight. Flood control corruption cases are now moving to the courts, and a major hillside development, Monterrazas de Cebu, has been found with serious environmental violations after typhoon-driven flooding. For developers, investors, and communities, the question is the same. How do we make sure urban projects are safe, compliant, and built to standard? Joining us now is Senior Undersecretary Henry Yap of the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, the agency that sets the country's land use and urban planning standards. Good morning, Yusek Yap. Thank you for being here with us.
Good morning.
Okay, let's start with a compliance temperature check. Given everything that's been going on with the flood control corruption scandals and the Monterrazas findings, what does this tell you about the actual level of compliance? How has that been over the recent years?
Yes, actually there's a great need now to review many of our plans. Many of our plans had been prepared several years or even decades ago, and there has not been updating by many of the local governments. In the case of Cebu, we noticed that many of the upland areas have already been authorized to provide the settlements area and other developments. And this has actually provided some issues and concerns to many of the residents in that area.
Yeah, we have to update the land use plans, especially in the wake of all of these climate changes. In the Cebu instance, in one day, they got 6 weeks worth of rainfall with Typhoon Tino. So these are abnormal weather conditions brought about by climate change. So you're saying that right now, how often are they updated, these plans? And we need to expedite that to make it how much sooner, how much more often?
Yes, we have provided a standard of 12 years for the updating of these plans. However, many of the plans that were approved previously were not climate change adapted, meaning that they were not risk-informed. They do not provide information based on environmental changes that we have noticed. So while there is a standard period for updating, the developments require that we check it from time to time. Let me use the example of Bogo City, which encountered an earthquake more than a month ago. They have an updated land use plan. However, the discoveries of new earthquake faults and sinkholes will necessitate the updating of those plans, and it cannot wait for another 10 to 12 years. No?
That's right.
So these are examples where the actual condition will dictate how often the review will have to be undertaken.
That's right. Based on the actual conditions, 12 years too long for a static plan. How dynamic do these have to be? From 12 years, do we cut it down to 5 years and then even shorter depending on certain specific conditions?
Yes, if there are major discoveries like the earthquake fault and the proliferation of sinkholes, then the updating is immediately required. However, if there are not much changes in a locality, then normally we will encourage a midterm review, say 5 to 6 years, to look at environmental impacts, change in economy conditions. These are also factors in the evaluating of the comprehensive land use plans.
And just to put things into context, all of the construction permits, all of that comes from the LGUs. But you guys, with DSUD, you just give the license to sell. Is that correct?
That's correct. From a planning perspective, we start with the comprehensive land use plans. All the cities, independent component cities and highly urbanized cities need to get the approval of the SUD. However, for municipal plans, their approval is only limited to the provincial government. Now, when we issue the development permits and the building permits, they are actually done by the local government. What we monitor and issue are the license to sell. This is the authority for brokers and the developers to sell the units that they have been given permits to construct.
Yeah. In the case of Monterrazas de Cebu, it's DENR specific, so we can't go into that in terms of that. But we can talk about the core lessons. What has this taught regulators, the LGU, and developers about safety risks involving high-risk terrain?
In the case of Monterrazas, the rise is but one of only several projects. Actually, that project was developed in the, I think, 2008, 2009. And there are the area covered about 150 hectares. But the present area that they're looking at, which is the rice, is only 3 hectares out of that 150. So we really have to look at it from a comprehensive way, not just pinpoint one specific area.
Yeah, so much to learn from that because, you know, land is limited and growth is pushing projects to high-risk zones. And so we need to create better systems if we're going to be developing in those areas. Another thing, based on what you've seen, do you think that the Monterrazas, this issue with that development is an isolated case, or could there be more like it around the country just quietly waiting to erupt?
There's a possibility that there are also other areas that have the same predicament. It is hard to say right now. We don't have an inventory of that. But what we've been doing now is encouraging our provincial governments and governors to already undertake a review of all their land use plans. It is very important that we go through a comprehensive review of all these plans so that if we notice that there are some areas that have not been updated and post-environmental risks, we can immediately address them.
Okay, what do we need from the whole of government in order to make this work para hindi na po maulit yung nangyari sa Monterrazas de Cebu?
There is also need for many of our government agencies to interact and to compare notes. No? One of the problems encountered here is that different agencies have different mandates and they issue separate permits. So there is need for these agencies to also talk, to coordinate, to ensure that another agency knows what is the impact of another agency's permit to a specific project.
Yeah, these failures, they didn't start yesterday. The problems we're seeing today, it shows weakness across the board in the system for years. What are the things we need to do now to make sure hindi na to mauulit?
Okay, for example, when the river overflowed, we noticed that many of the easements have already been occupied by informal settlers. They should have been not allowed to settle in those areas. So naturally, when the volume of water reached that site, the water will look for open areas or to spread to where it can flow over. So many of the houses there were affected. So, in fact, during the visit of the President 2 weeks ago, the President has instructed the local governments not to allow families to go back to these no-build zones, no? To ensure that the problem and the catastrophe or the calamity does not happen again.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about the effect and the impacts of the flood control cases and the Monterraza findings. Oversight failures raise development risk. They delay financing and they push up insurance costs and they weaken investor confidence. From your vantage point at DSUD, Yusek Yap, how are these incidents affecting project timelines today?
Okay. Naturally, many of the people reviewing the permits now have to take more time to review it. They are afraid that eventually, if there is some investigation, they might be blamed for not doing their work properly. So that entails more time and resources to review the plans. At the same time, I am afraid that some might be too gun shy and would now impose many conditions. This is to again safeguard their own and protect the way they approve the plans. And this would naturally cause impact in time and also costs on the developers
More
themselves.
reviews, more approvals, more conservative timelines, more requirements. It seems like it's going to be even more difficult for the developers.
Yes, that would be one way to summarize the concerns. But I think it is a matter of all government talking together and discussing this collectively and interfacing with the private sector. We don't have to go to that extreme, but unless we take a proactive stance, that may be the consequence of what would happen.
Yeah, we need to take a proactive stance. Equally important, how do we strengthen enforcement, but also while doing so, without exposing developers, legitimate developers, to harassment and extortion?
Yeah, I think what we need is to make sure that the monitor do not happen at the end of the project or only when a calamity happens. No, I think it is the role of government to regularly monitor and to take note if there are already deviations that they've noticed, to already call the attention of our developers. The idea is not to keep on issuing notice of violation, but to ask them to comply and to be cognizant of the problems that they may may cause in the future.
Okay, last question. We're tight on time. What are the concrete steps we can expect from DSUD in order to rebuild confidence in oversight?
Okay, one, we've already issued a reminder to many of our governors, provincial governors, and we're asking also our regional office to issue these reminders to the local chief executives of the different cities and municipalities. Second, we've also tomorrow going to launch two programs, Plan Smart for human settlement. This is an automated system where we can gather data from various government agencies and then compile that data and prepare a first draft of the comprehensive land use plans. That way, instead of taking 2 to 3 years to prepare the plan, we can do it in an hour or 2 hours. The first draft can generally be prepared in that short time. That way, there will be no more reasons for local government to say they do not have the resources or the manpower to be able to prepare an updated plan.
Okay, Senior USEC Henry Yap, maraming salamat.
Thank you very much.